Supreme Court rules ex-presidents have broad immunity, dimming chance of a pre-election Trump trial. Washington AP, the Supreme Court on Monday ruled for the first time that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution, extending the delay in the Washington criminal case against Donald Trump on charges he plotted to overturn his 2020 presidential election loss and all but ending prospects the former president could be tried before the November election. In a historic 6-3 ruling, the court's conservative majority, including the 3 justices appointed by Trump, narrowed the case against him and returned it to the trial court to determine what is left of special counsel Jack Smith's indictment. Trump celebrated a big win on X. President Joe Biden said the justices set a dangerous precedent that undermines the rule of this nation. The Supreme Court makes it harder to charge Capitol riot defendants with obstruction, charge Trump faces. Washington AP, the Supreme Court on Friday limited a federal obstruction law that has been used to charge hundreds of Capitol riot defendants as well as former President Donald Trump. The justices ruled 6-3 that the charge of obstructing an official proceeding, enacted in 2002 in response to the financial scandal that brought down Enron Corp., must include proof that defendants tried to tamper with or destroy documents.
As you come on to the page, kindly hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. And don't forget to put on the notification bell, so you can be notified when I drop the next video. Thank you.
In a historic 6-3 ruling, the court's conservative majority, including the 3 justices appointed by Trump, narrowed the case against him and returned it to the trial court to determine what is left of special counsel Jack Smith's indictment. Trump celebrated a big win on X. President Joe Biden said the justices set a dangerous precedent that undermines the rule of this nation. The Supreme Court makes it harder to charge Capitol riot defendants with obstruction, charge Trump faces. Washington AP, the Supreme Court on Friday limited a federal obstruction law that has been used to charge hundreds of Capitol riot defendants as well as former President Donald Trump. The justices ruled 6-3 that the charge of obstructing an official proceeding, enacted in 2002 in response to the financial scandal that brought down Enron Corp., must include proof that defendants tried to tamper with or destroy documents. Only some of the people who violently attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, fall into that category. The overwhelming majority of the approximately 1,000 people who have been convicted of or pleaded guilty to Capitol riot-related federal crimes were not charged with obstruction and will not be affected by the outcome. Still, the decision is likely to be used as fodder for claims by Trump and his Republican allies that the Justice Department has treated the Capitol riot defendants unfairly. It's unclear how the court's decision will affect the case against Trump in Washington, which includes charges other than obstruction. Special counsel Jack Smith has said the charges faced by the former president would not be affected. The Supreme Court ended its term by ruling for the first time that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution, a decision that almost certainly means Donald Trump won't stand trial before the November election. That closely watched ruling, which drew sharp dissent from the minority justices, was among a cluster of consequential opinions handed down in the court's busy final few weeks. Presidential immunity. Ruled for the first time that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution in a decision that extends the delay in Donald Trump's trial in Washington on charges of election interference and all but rules out a trial before the November election. The justices returned the case to U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who would preside over a trial. She must now sort out what is left of special counsel Jack Smith's indictment of the former president. Authority: Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Clarence Thomas, Justice Samuel Alito, Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Dissent: Trump seeks to set aside New York hush money verdict hours after Supreme Court ruling. Donald Trump's lawyers on Monday asked the New York judge who presided over his hush money trial to set aside his conviction and delay his sentencing, scheduled for next week. The letter to Judge Juan M. Merchant cited the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling earlier Monday and asked the judge to delay Trump's sentencing while he weighs the High Court's decision and how it could influence the New York case, according to the letter obtained by the Associated Press. The lawyers argue that the Supreme Court's decision confirmed a position the defense raised earlier in the case that prosecutors should have been precluded from introducing some evidence they said constituted official presidential acts, according to the letter. In prior court filings, Trump contended he is immune from prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office. His lawyers did not raise that as a defense in the hush money case, but they argued that some evidence, including Trump's social media posts about former lawyer Michael Cohen, comes from his time as president and should have been excluded from the trial because of immunity protections. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office declined comment Monday night. Court orders white nationalists to pay $2 million more for Charlottesville Unite the Right violence. Richmond, Virginia. AP, 4 years after violence erupted during the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, a jury ordered white nationalist leaders and organizations to pay a total of more than $26 million in damages to people with physical or emotional injuries from the event. Most of that money, $24 million, was for punitive damages, but a judge later slashed that amount to $350,000, to be shared by 8 plaintiffs. On Monday, a federal appeals court restored more than $2 million in punitive damages, finding that each of the plaintiffs should receive $350,000, instead of the $43,750 each would have received under the lower court's ruling. A 3-judge panel of the Richmond-based 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the jury's award of $2 million in compensatory damages, but found that a state law that imposes the $350,000 cap on punitive damages should be applied per person instead of for all 8 plaintiffs, as a lower court judge ruled. The ruling stems from a federal lawsuit against 24 white nationalists and organizations that participated in 2 days of demonstrations in Charlottesville to protest the city's plan to remove a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. On the second day, after the Unite the Right rally had been declared an unlawful assembly, James Alex Fields Jr., a white supremacist from Maumee, Ohio, intentionally drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing 1 woman and injuring dozens more. Fields, who was one of the defendants in the civil case, is now serving a life sentence for murder and hate crimes. The Fourth Circuit panel rejected a request from the defendants that the court ask the Supreme Court of Virginia to rule on the question of whether each plaintiff can receive $350,000 in punitive damages, saying in its ruling that it found the state law's language and history clear enough to predict how Virginia's High Court would rule. Over 2 years ago, the jury used its $24 million punitive damages award to send an unmistakable message to the defendants and to the public about the outrageous misconduct that took place in Charlottesville, Virginia. While the law compels us to reduce the award, it's long past time for that message to be delivered, Chief Judge Albert Diaz wrote in the 3-0 ruling. Attorneys for the plaintiffs said they were pleased by the court's ruling. Today's decision restores over $2 million in punitive damages from the jury's verdict, which sent a clear message against racist and anti-Semitic hate and violence, attorneys Roberta Kaplan, David E. Mills and Gabrielle E. Tenzer said in a statement. Lawyers for the defendants did not immediately respond to emails seeking comment. The verdict from the 2021 trial was a rebuke to the white nationalist movement, particularly for the 24 individuals and organizations accused in a federal lawsuit of orchestrating violence against African Americans, Jewish people and others in a meticulously planned conspiracy. Here's a look at some of the false claims made during Biden and Trump's first debate. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump traded barbs and a variety of false and misleading information as they faced off in their first debate of the 2024 election. Trump falsely represented the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol as a relatively small number of people who were ushered in by police and misstated the strength of the economy during his administration. Biden, who tends to lean more on exaggerations and embellishments rather than outright lies, misrepresented the cost of insulin and overstated what Trump said about using disinfectant to address COVID. Here's a look at the false and misleading claims on Thursday night by the 2 candidates. Jan. 6. Trump. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol and in many cases were ushered in by the police. The facts. That's false. The attack on the U.S. Capitol was the deadliest assault on the seat of American power in over 200 years. As thoroughly documented by video, photographs and people who were there, thousands of people descended on Capitol Hill in what became a brutal scene of hand-to-hand combat with police. In an internal memo on March 7, 2023, U.S. Capitol Police Chief J. Thomas Manger said that the allegation that our officers helped the rioters and acted as tour guides is outrageous and false. A Capitol Police spokesperson confirmed the memo's authenticity to the Associated Press. More than 1,400 people have been charged with federal crimes stemming from the riot. More than 850 people have pleaded guilty to crimes, and 200 others have been convicted at trial. Trump, on then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's actions on Jan. 6. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard and she turned them down. The facts: Pelosi did not direct the National Guard. Further, as the Capitol came under attack, she and then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called for military assistance, including from the National Guard. The Capitol Police Board makes the decision on whether to call National Guard troops to the Capitol. It is made up of the House Sergeant at Arms, the Senate Sergeant at Arms, and the architect of the Capitol. The board decided not to call the Guard ahead of the insurrection but did eventually request assistance after the rioting had already begun, and the troops arrived several hours later. The House Sergeant at Arms reported to Pelosi and the Senate Sergeant at Arms reported to McConnell. There is no evidence that either Pelosi or McConnell directed the security officials not to call the Guard beforehand. Drew Hamill, a then spokesperson for Pelosi, said after the insurrection that Pelosi was never informed of such a request. Taxes and regulations. Trump, on Biden, he wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. The facts: that's not accurate. Trump has used that line at rallies, but it has no basis in fact. Biden actually wants to prevent tax increases on anyone making less than $400,000. Insulin. Biden: it's $15 for an insulin shot, as opposed to $400. The facts: no, that's not exactly right. Out-of-pocket insulin costs for older Americans on Medicare were capped at $35 in the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act that President Joe Biden signed into law. The cap took effect last year, when many drug makers announced they would lower the price of the drug to $35 for most users on private insurance. But Biden regularly overstates that many people used to pay up to $400 monthly. People with diabetes who have Medicare or private insurance paid about $450 yearly prior to the law, a Department of Health and Human Services study released in December 2022 found. Climate change. Trump, touting his environmental record, said that, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever, and that he supports immaculate air and water. The facts: that's far from the whole story. During his presidency, Trump rolled back some provisions of the Clean Water Act, eased regulations on coal, oil and gas companies, and pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. When wildfires struck California in 2020, Trump dismissed the scientific consensus that climate change had played a role. Trump also dismissed scientists' warnings about climate change and routinely proposed deep cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency. Those reductions were blocked by Democratic and Republican lawmakers. Abortion. Trump: the problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. The facts: Trump inaccurately referred to abortions after birth. Infanticide is criminalized in every state, and no state has passed a law that allows killing a baby after birth. Abortion rights advocates say terms like this and late-term abortions attempt to stigmatize abortions later in pregnancy. Abortions later in pregnancy are exceedingly rare. In 2020, less than 1% of abortions in the United States were performed at or after 21 weeks, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Abortions later in pregnancy also are usually the result of serious complications, such as fetal anomalies, that put the life of the woman or fetus at risk, medical experts say. In most cases, these are also wanted pregnancies, experts say. Russia. Trump on Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was detained in Russia. He should have had him out a long time ago, but Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. The facts: Trump is wrong to say that Biden pays any sort of fee, every time, to secure the release of hostages and wrongfully detained Americans. There's also zero evidence that Putin is asking for any money in order to free Gershkovich. Just like in the Trump administration, the deals during the Biden administration that have brought home hostages and detainees involved prisoner swaps, not money transfers. Trump's reference to money appeared to be about the 2023 deal in which the U.S. secured the release of 5 detained Americans in Iran after billions of dollars in frozen Iranian assets were transferred from banks in South Korea to Qatar. The U.S. has said that the money would be held in restricted accounts and will only be able to be used for humanitarian goods, such as medicine and food. COVID-19. Biden. Trump told Americans to inject bleach into their arms to treat COVID-19. The facts: that's overstating it. Rather, Trump asked whether it would be possible to inject disinfectant into the lungs. And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in 1 minute, he said at an April 2020 press conference. And is there a way we can do something like that, by injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets in the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs, so it'd be interesting to check that, so that you're going to have to use medical doctors with, but it sounds interesting to me. So, we'll see, but the whole concept of the light, the way it kills it in 1 minute. That's pretty powerful. Super predators. Trump, what he's done to the black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't forget that. Super predators, and they've taken great offense at it. The facts. This oft-repeated claim by Trump dating back to the 2020 campaign is untrue. It was Hillary Clinton, then the First Lady, who used the term super predator to advocate for the 1994 crime bill that Biden co-authored more than 30 years ago. Biden did warn of predators in a floor speech in support of his bill. Migrants. Trump, referring to Biden, he's the one that killed people with a bad border and flooding hundreds of thousands of people dying and also killing our citizens when they come in. The facts. A mass influx of migrants coming into the U.S. illegally across the southern border has led to a number of false and misleading claims by Trump. For example, he regularly claims other countries are emptying their prisons and mental institutions to send to the U.S. There is no evidence to support that. Trump has also argued the influx of immigrants is causing a crime surge in the U.S., although statistics actually show violent crime is on the way down. There have been recent high-profile and heinous crimes allegedly committed by people in the country illegally. But FBI statistics do not separate out crimes by the immigration status of the assailant, nor is there any evidence of a spike in crime perpetrated by migrants, either along the U.S.-Mexico border or in cities seeing the greatest influx of migrants, like New York. Studies have found that people living in the country illegally are less likely than native-born Americans to have been arrested for violent, drug and property crimes. For more than a century, critics of immigration have sought to link new arrivals to crime. In 1931, the Wickersham Commission did not find any evidence supporting a connection between immigration and increased crime, and many studies since then have reached similar conclusions. Texas is the only state that tracks crimes by immigration status. A 2020 study published by the National Academy of Sciences found considerably lower felony arrest rates among people in the United States illegally than legal immigrants or native-born. Some crime is expected given the large population of immigrants. There were an estimated 10.5 million people in the country illegally in 2021, according to the latest estimate by Pew Research Center, a figure that has almost certainly risen with large influxes at the border. In 2022, the Census Bureau estimated the foreign-born population at 46.2 million, or nearly 14% of the total, with most states seeing double-digit percentage increases in the last dozen years. Charlottesville. Biden, referring to Trump after the deadly white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017, the one who said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." The facts. Trump did use those words to describe attendees of the deadly rally, which was planned by white nationalists. But as Trump supporters have pointed out, he also said that day that he wasn't talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists in attendance. "You had some very bad people in that group," Trump said during a news conference a few days after the rally, "but you also had people that were very fine people, on both sides." He then added that he wasn't talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. Instead, he said, the press had been unfair in its treatment of protesters who were there to innocently and legally protest the removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The gathering planned by white nationalists shocked the nation when it exploded into chaos. Violent brawling in the streets, racist and anti-Semitic chants, smoke bombs, and finally, a car speeding into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing one and injuring dozens more. Economy. Trump. We had the greatest economy in history. The facts. That's not accurate. First of all, the pandemic triggered a massive recession during his presidency. The government borrowed $3.1 trillion in 2020 to stabilize the economy. Trump had the ignominy of leaving the White House with fewer jobs than when he entered. But even if you take out issues caused by the pandemic, economic growth averaged 2.67% during Trump's first 3 years. That's pretty solid. But it's nowhere near the 4% average during Bill Clinton's 2 terms from 1993 to 2001, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. In fact, growth has been stronger so far under Biden than under Trump. Trump did have the unemployment rate get as low as 3.5% before the pandemic. But again, the labor force participation rate for people 25 to 54, the core of the U.S. working population, was higher under Clinton. The participation rate has also been higher under Biden than Trump. Trump did have the unemployment rate get as low as 3.5% before the pandemic. But again, the labor force participation rate for people 25 to 54, the core of the U.S. working population, was higher under Clinton. The participation rate has also been higher under Biden than Trump. Trump also likes to talk about how low inflation was under him. Gasoline fell as low as $1.77 a gallon. But, of course, that price dip happened during pandemic lockdowns when few people were driving. The low prices were due to a global health crisis, not Trump's policies. Similarly, average 30-year mortgage rates dipped to 2.65% during the pandemic. Those low rates were a byproduct of Federal Reserve efforts to prop up a weak economy, rather than the sign of strength that Trump now suggests it was.
As you leave the page, don't forget to hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you for watching.